Just briefly, squad-wise, from Tuesday, anything picked up? Anything that's going to trouble you for the weekend?
No, we should be the same, really, with the added bonus of having Thomas Callas available for inclusion in the squad.
So, given what you said previously, would you be looking at giving him a few minutes rather than giving him a big chunk of time?
Yeah, if we include him in the match day sort of 18, it will be to be on the bench and with an eye on late cover in the game. But we'll make that decision tomorrow.
But for him, that must be, I know he's one who hides his emotions quite well, but having been best part of a year with almost no football, that's a long time.
Yeah, it is. And especially for a player who's in the last year of his contract, I think that puts added pressure on him or anybody else in that sort of position. So, I'm pleased that we've got him back now.
And on the back of not just Tuesday, but the Saturday performance, the performances before had been good, but when you get the results, it doesn't half make it easier to get players to believe in themselves a little bit more.
Yeah, there is an element of that, and there's also the point that the 3 games that we drew prior to that were very hard fought results, and the players deserve some sort of reward for the work that they've put in. So we're by no means sort of turned the corner, if you like, in terms of the bigger picture, but there are certainly signs that we can make some progress. Yeah.
Do you feel the slight tweak you've made to the formation has helped in terms of some players feeling more comfortable in their positions?
Maybe, but I mean, formations, we can talk about formations all the time. Look, Mark Sykes has moved up the field and scored 3 goals in 2 games. So, I couldn't argue with people who wanted to make a point that he's benefited from that. We've done, over the last sort of calendar year, better with 2 up front and 1 behind. And of course, our defensive record has been such that we've needed at times an extra player at the back. But look, it just suits how we are playing at the moment. The players are very receptive to change, which is good. And I don't think at any point I've made a statement that we're going to play one way or another. I prefer to play the way which suits the players that we have. And at the moment, of course, since we've made a change, things have been better. The players are continue to do everything they can to win matches, and there's nobody more pleased for them than me and the rest of the staff that they're getting their rewards. So if a change in formation helps, then great. I've got no qualms about that, and wouldn't have any qualms about making further changes if it was beneficial to the players and the team.
And I'm not sure that managers or players would. It's part of the game, isn't it? But look, the fact that Mark was in the right place at the right time. Yes, he's in those positions, but you don't know the ball's necessarily going to come in. And when you get off on the right foot like that, he must be walking on air at the moment.
But he should be there, whether he plays at wing back or right side of a front 3. But you probably noticed that. So in the games recently with Antoine and Naki, they play closer together, and Sykes is a bit more of a wider outlier, but that suits his game too. So it's just important to try and get some sort of rhythm, and we've been able to field an unchanged side, which is I think also beneficial. So we continue to work hard to keep players available, and that's the most important thing. But one of the other things to recognise as well is that when subs have gone onto the field, whether it be for a short period of time or a longer spell, they've all contributed or endeavoured to contribute in a positive way, and I think that shows that's a positive sign too.
So this weekend, I'm not sure I've ever seen a team like Blackburn that have got this far into a season with a record like theirs. Is that unusual? Is that a first for you?
I've never seen it before, so it's a draw written all over it then, isn't it? Yeah, I mean 14 wins and 13 defeats. It's something which is very unusual, but we know from the game at their place, which we won 3-2. It could have been more comfortable, but they've got good players, and so we expect it to be a tough game. But I think they'll be expecting us to be a pretty tough proposition too.
Is there, as a coach or looking at trying to analyse it, is there a reason why you think they've had that, or is there just an element of luck in the same way with you and penalties, or bad luck in that case?
I think they are a side who have match winners going forward, certainly, and I think that's when their key players have not been available. I think then they've, like last week, not done quite so well. But they are a side who play pretty expansive football, and they have good forward players. So whether that's just the reason or not, I don't try and overanalyze that. We do a preparation in terms of what we think the strengths and weaknesses are, and then it's concentrating very much on us trying to be at our best, because when we're at our best, we're a tough side to play against.
And just finally, it is January. I'm sure you would be telling us if there's anything happening, but is there anything moving closer?
Well, you'll be aware of lots of stories that have been out there this week. The club have received offers for Antoine and inquiries about other players too. But as we sit right now, there'll be nothing happening this week. Whether that will change next week remains to be seen. But Antoine will be in the squad for tomorrow.
Thank you very much.
Pleasure.
On Antoine,
Yeah.
How is he? Because obviously, as a player, you're aware of that happening. I don't know whether that be if you're telling him, people close to him telling him, or he's just seeing on TV or whatever. How's he kind of reacted to that?
He gets absolute clarity from us. And as his manager, I've had many conversations with him right the way through from the summer, with him being injured, build up to the World Cup, and of course the speculation about the window. And I'm as transparent as I can be. I always keep him up to speed with how I see the situation and how we see it as a football club. We try and be as open as possible, but of course you're absolutely right. There's and I've said in other press conferences that one of the factors that people don't always necessarily take account of in the way that it really works is the feelings of the player. And so it's difficult for young players who are ambitious when there is real, not just speculation, but actual interest. And there has been, we've received offers of a fashion from Bournemouth and from Burnley too. So and there is speculation about other clubs. So of course it can be potentially very unsettling for players, and so that's why I very much believe in being as frank and open with them as possible. And Antoine is a young man who's had a pretty good couple of years now on a personal level in terms of breaking into the side and showing not just potential but his ability to perform at a very good level. The one thing that he's working harder to do now is score more goals, and he's like many forwards who go through spells of achieving that. But even when he's not doing that, he's still a real handful. So we know we've got a talent in Antoine at the club, but we need to protect our interests as a football club. we need to make sure that if we get to a point where there is a deal that's accepted, that it's done in the right way. Until that point, Antoine is our player, and you know, what I would say about him though is he's a really honest player, honest person, and he's dealing with it as well as he can. But speculation can be unsettling for anybody.
Certainly, I think everyone in this room would agree that having seen Antoine when he was a teenager to where he is now, his maturity has been, how he's matured has been, he's almost a different person in many ways. There's no doubt in your minds, in terms of, Ed touched on his selection for tomorrow, that it could affect him for the game tomorrow.
Well, of course, it's something that has been discussed, and had the deal, if the deal was close to being done, then I think that would be a bigger problem. But as we stand at the moment, that's not the case, and I think it's important that like I said, I've spoken with him, and I've been as frank as I can be, and also as realistic as I can be, and the realism that's involved in situations like this would be, for instance, speaking to a player and saying, look, you have to get your head around the fact that something might not happen in this window. And that is always a reality, that is a possibility of reality. But of course, if a deal materialises which is acceptable to both parties, that's where it's got to, that's a critical part of this. So it's you know, I've dealt with players who are not entirely happy in the past, and it's a part of football that you have to be able to work with players who have been unsettled. But clearly, it's in everybody's interest for all parties to be engaged with what you're trying to do, and that is, we want our players to play well for us and be successful for us. We want to keep our best players, but it's not always possible. So we'll see where it goes, and until we get to a point where a deal is the valuation, our valuation is met with the player, then they remain our player until that changes.
If you'll indulge me a little bit,
yeah, go on.
And I appreciate, I'm sort of,
I don't know how
cutting my nose off
way, but go on.
But though the sort of the Bournemouth's activity got into the public domain pretty quick.
Okay.
Do you think that was deliberate? And I'm leaning on conspiracy.
I'll be absolutely honest with you. You know, I'm not somebody who will trawl it and find out what's what. I like to be updated, but I like to be updated with facts. And I'll get my facts from the people I work for. So my point of reference is us, and speaking with Richard, and spoke to John today too. You know, it's important to try and make sure that you have relevant facts to work with. How clubs do their own business is up to them. So it's, as far as I'm concerned, and we as a football club try and be as transparent as possible, and like to go through official channels. But of course, football changes, and clubs work in different ways. And so, for instance, I've already mentioned Burnley, and the Burnley to us, to Richard, was done club to club, and that's really, I think, how it should be done. But of course, increasingly now, there are third parties involved, and sometimes clubs choose to go down those channels. Now, that's all I'm going to say. It differs from club to club. Am I being judgmental about other people? It doesn't matter really what my own views are. what remains the same is that as a football club, we need to get the right deal for us if we are going to part with our best players, and that's really the bottom line. So how you want to interpret what I'm saying is, and you're an intelligent guy, so you'll be able to read between the lines, is that, yeah, there are different ways of achieving the same outcomes. But I think whatever happens, there has to be an element of respect and an element of appreciative thinking and understanding of how people work. But we try and do things the right way, and what we believe is the right way for everybody involved. It's not about, we have to protect ourselves first, but then of course, so for instance, Antoine's in the middle of all this, and he's the one that potentially suffers because of it. But like I say, the ways to overcome that are, I think, just to be as open and as understanding as possible, but also players have an obligation to honour their contracts.
Stefan Bacic went out on loan this week. Could you just, what the sort of theory behind that? Because obviously he's not been at the club long. I think we can all see he's going to go and play more football over there. Is there anything else to it?
Well, he's got the under-21 tournament this summer coming up for France. He's been frustrated that when he signed here, he came with an injury which we were aware of. In pre-season, for instance, both Dan Bentley and Max fighting out that opening spot, and Def wasn't available at that point. So it's his opportunities have been limited. He's done well in the 21s when he's played for us, but it's just in his interest and ours for him to go out. Got to remember the change of culture, learning a language, all those things together, and dealing with the disappointment of not playing is quite a big thing for a young man. And he is young. He's still very, very young, especially for a goalkeeper. So, in an ideal world, we talked about loaning him in England to start with, but this opportunity came along, and we just felt for football reasons, as one, his well-being, and for him to get back playing in a more familiar environment, that would be a good outcome for him. Of course, what it does do, and there's been speculation about Dan's position as well, which you're obviously going to ask a question in a minute, so I'll pick up on that before you start. And how do we sit with that? Well, we have two very good keepers still at the football club. Max is playing well at the moment, and we'll see how things develop. I'm not ruling anything in or out. So Dan's contract's up at the end of the season, so we'll see whether anything develops. But we can never leave ourselves short. We always need to have the right cover. So for argument's sake, if something happened with Dan in the last week and a half or whatever it is, we'd need somebody else to come in. So we're never going to leave ourselves short. And again, conversations, it's important to have conversations with players so that they know where they sit. Their agents can talk to the club, they can do whatever they want. I'll talk to the players.
Another player potentially could go before the window is Han Noah. Is there any update on that?
No, there's just been nothing of any note or consequence, apart from there was talk about Anderlecht. I've not heard anything of note about that, and at the moment, for Ham Noah, it's a difficult situation because it's one that's been fashioned by himself really in many ways, and it's unfortunate. But we'll just have to see what happens. in the meantime, we've got other young players who've stepped into the fold and have done very, very well. So it's, that's a risk that players have to evaluate what the risk is once they choose a certain route, but the door's never closed on people. It's just that we have to make sure that if we're talking about fast tracking players from our academy, if they're good enough and they step up and they do well and they take somebody's place, that's life.
People smarter than me have noticed he's been stuck on 99 league appearances since
right.
October. Is there anything more to that?
I've got no idea about that.
Okay.
So there you go.
Just on Sam,
I don't know whether it got any relevance anyway.
well, it's just obviously with the clauses potentially with Monaco, or if there's anything.
Oh,
beyond.
I've got no idea.
Okay.
That's a question for somebody who looks at the contracts.
Fair play. How's Sam Bell been? Obviously, a fantastic night for him and the club as well, I guess.
Yeah.
Overall.
I spoke to his dad today. Actually,
I
spoke to Mickey today. So, it's nice as a dad as well to not just as somebody who's played for the club himself and as who's now a coach in the academy, but just as a dad, and it's a fantastic thing. So, Sam, I'm really pleased for Sam because that's something that he's had to wait a while for. He made his debut in the season that I arrived, and unfortunately pulled his hamstring after about 10 minutes. So, and then he's had one or two setbacks and gone out on loan, which wasn't entirely a success for him at the time. But all those types of experiences, whether they are good or bad at the time you experience them, there's something you can lean on or glean some information from further date down the line. So everybody's really pleased for him because he's a good player and he's a very popular member of the squad. So and it's great for us because it gives us another option, and that's an important thing for us too. So again, it's another, I suppose, example of players taking advantage of the situation, and great that he's got his first goal, and it was a fantastic goal too. But it just gives us that added option.
Thanks, Nigel.
Yeah, pleasure.
Hi, Nigel. One player that obviously made his debut in midweek was Omar Taylor-Clark, I think.
Yeah.
In the under-21s game against Cardiff, he played as a wing-back, and obviously was moved into midfield. As
He's
a young
midfielder.
He's a midfielder. Is he a midfielder naturally, or do you look to perhaps try him in different positions and then he finds his way on?
Tins and his staff are a bit like me. They'll play where they're put, and they'll play where the team needs them to play. And so for that game, for instance, because we got a number of more senior first team players playing, so Han Noah and Joe Williams played in that game that you were talking about against Cardiff. It's just about trying to accommodate those first team players and also keep the mainstays of the under 21 side in there. And when the seniors came off, he reverted back to midfield position. So Omar's been training with the first team for quite a while now. He's done really well. I was delighted that he was able to get some time against Swansea, and I thought he did really well when he went on because he just got to the pace of it quickly, and that'll be the benefit from actually training with the first team. Because one of the things that we always talk to the younger players about when they make their breakthrough in the first team in games is that it's sometimes the pace of the game which overtakes them, and that's the one thing to be mindful of. And so actually to be involved with the first team training, and the fact that the academy train very much in the same way that we do. We have sort of fitness levels which are becoming comparable, which is good.
I know one player who's obviously benefited from being in that environment is Alex Scott. It seems that he's been offered a new contract. If he does sign up, what does that offer? A bit of security, or is it just tying down one of your most prized assets, and obviously that eventually might drive up the transfer fee?
All of it. We want to keep our best players. We say that, and I keep saying that. It's difficult when you've got speculation around some of your prized assets, so to speak. And the reality is that it's impossible to keep everybody. But what we will continue to do is try and build for the future, but still try and affect the here and now, and that is to make some progress this season, but try and look after our longer term future by having a club which has an ethos of producing players for us, not for other people.
And for the players, I think you mentioned just before the start of the new year, you said that players have been offered new contracts and they might be on less than what they're on. Is that a hard sell to them, or can they see obviously the project and the longevity?
Look, it's a reality of where we are at the moment, and it's not about trying to. It's about trying to make us. We talk about sustainability, and that's one thing, but that's where football is at the moment. And again, it's about just being open and honest. So, to be honest with you, I would rather players know what the future looks like, and the reality is they're playing for the futures anyway, whether it's here or somewhere else. So players are always playing for a contract. I don't buy into this idea of, if players don't do it for us, they're less likely to go and get a lucrative contract somewhere else. So they're always playing for contracts, and I think just a bit of transparency goes quite a long way, actually, in terms of just people understanding where they sit.
I know we're talking about players leaving perhaps. Last year we saw Tim Closer trialling, and then obviously he signed a contract. What's happened for him? Has it been a case of Naismith, Tim Closer? So obviously Cal Naismith has come in centre back, and you've also had tremendous form as Zach Fine.
Yeah,
so what's the case?
Tim knows his situation, so he's able to leave. Yeah.
Is there anything that's happened in the last year? Is it just a case of players being ahead of him?
No. It's just a decision that we've made.
And just finishing lastly, I'm not sure if you came across a video perhaps of a guy City manager got sacked. His family shared it, just going through the emotions of obviously you get the job and then you get sacked. So I was just wondering.
See a video
of Mark Hudson being sacked by Cardiff, and they were not sure.
Listen, come on, you know me. I don't watch stuff.
It was more just a case of it was quite an emotional thing, just the family involved and things like that. So I'm just wondering if you ever had that experience. Has there ever been a time that you've been at a club, and obviously
I think I've been sacked at most places. I've walked out of a couple of places, but look, it's, and I like Mark, by the way. I understand where you're going with the question. I think, look, what it illustrates is how quickly things can change, and how, for people who think that the game's not emotional for the people involved in it, it's not really the case. You might, how people behave and how their exterior is one thing, but what goes on inside is something different. And I've not seen it, and I don't want to be flippant about it. It's something that, especially when you're new into management as well, it's probably a bit of it's a bit of a shock as well how brutal it is, and it can be really brutal. So I've had my own experiences which are unsavoury. I've had my experiences which are very, very ruthless, and yeah, it can have a quite a lasting effect on you. But he'll be fine because he's got his family, and that is, if anything, it'll put life in perspective.
And with the managerial revolving door, you're actually the third longest serving manager in the Championship now. So, and you've only been here almost 2 years. Is it you happy to be at a club with Bristol City that can allow that time for you to implement your plans? You talk about 3-year plans.
Listen, I'm not naive. There is a shelf life for everybody, and there's a tolerance level as well. But what you have to do more than anything is be very clear on how you're trying to work and what you're trying to do. And so one of the traps that you can't fall into is being reactive as to you've got to be aware of what's going on out there, but you've got to have a clarity of thought of what you're trying to do and where you sit in that. And look, everybody's under pressure, and in this game, you don't go into it unless you're prepared to endure the more difficult times, because there's going to be plenty.